Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. To my loyal bed crimers, hi, happy Friday. To anyone new to the channel, a special welcome. Do me a favor, if after watching the video you find you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. Now, without further ado, let's get started. I want to update you on this most horrific crime. Here's what we know as of today, Friday, November 18th, 2022. The area around the University of Idaho has become a bit of a ghost town, as many students have decided to return home early for Thanksgiving, some out of fear and likely some due to the trauma of the event. Because the perpetrator has yet to be caught, the fear level on the campus is at an all-time high. One student named Ava Driftmeyer, who lives near the house where the crime occurred, said, and I quote, "It's so dark. It's just like a dark cloud over everything. We're leaving as fast as we can." It hasn't helped that Moscow Police Department Chief James Fry said Wednesday, and I quote, "We cannot say there's no threat to the community." End quote. Autopsy findings have been released for the 4 University of Idaho students who were discovered deceased in an off-campus house around 11:30 a.m. on Sunday, November 14th. Those students were Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Konkals, Xana Kernodle, and Madison Mogan. The autopsies showed that each victim died from wounds from an edged weapon, and the manner of death in each case has been ruled homicide. Police are now looking for shops in the area that sell a particular style of these edged weapons known as kabar. The company describes this weapon as being similar to what the character Rambo carries. That's scary because we all know what that looks like and the size of it. This particular style is typically about 6 inches long. It has a blade on one side and a serrated edge on the other. This knife is used by the Marines, the Army, the Navy, the Coast Guard, and underwater demolition teams. It's also widely used by survivalists and outdoorsmen and women. So it sounds like whoever committed this crime may be someone who is into outdoor activities such as camping, hiking, and so on. Note that back on September 12th of 2022, the University of Idaho issued something called a vandal alert to students and staff. The alert was issued after the police department received a report that a group of students was walking between the steam plant parking lot and the Student Recreation Center on Paradise Path and were threatened by a person with an edged object. The assailant was described as a white male, aged 18 to 22 years old, and he was dressed all in black. No one was harmed during that incident. So now, almost exactly 2 months later, we have this violent attack. It makes you wonder if the same person who threatened those students in September is the person who committed this crime. If so, it would seem to be not such a targeted crime as the police have said, but more a crime committed by an unhinged person who saw an opportunity and went for it. And if it's not the same person as the one who threatened the students in September, then this small town of Moscow, Idaho, would appear to have at least 2 unhinged people walking around with edged weapons. What are the odds of that? I keep thinking about that young man in the video from the Grub Trucker food truck, where we see Madison Mogan and Kaylee Konkals waiting for food around 1:41 a.m. Sunday morning. That guy is white, and he definitely looks like he's between 18 and 22 years old. The mystery deepens. During last Sunday's deadly attack, 2 additional roommates were inside the large multi-level rental home at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, when the crime occurred. Note that this house is big. It's 2,295 square feet with 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. There are 3 levels. 2 surviving roommates had bedrooms up on the 3rd floor. Knowing the layout of the home, as well as the time of the crime, somewhere between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., makes it much easier to understand how these 2 students could be inside during the attack and not hear it going down. I would imagine they were both fast asleep by that hour, way up there on the 3rd floor, cushioned in their beds, behind locked doors. They would have been deep in dreamland and unaware. This reminds me of O.J. Simpson's 2 young children who were fast asleep inside their mother Nicole's condo when she and her friend Ron Goldman were attacked just outside the front door. Heavy sleepers can indeed slumber through such things. The 2 roommates in this case who were asleep on the 3rd floor are Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke. Note that both Dylan and Bethany are helping the police with the investigation, and their names were already cited in an article about the crime on the dailymail.com website. Dylan wrote the following on her Facebook, and let me warn you, this is some violent stuff. So if that type of thing triggers you, please stop watching now. Here is what Dylan wrote, and I quote, "Well, first off, we heard Xana and Ethan come home first and talk to him. They were both drunk, and that's when we went to bed. We live on the 3rd floor and always lock our doors to prevent people from stumbling in our rooms. We're used to noise because it's a party house. We were up late that night and didn't come downstairs until noon when the cops came to investigate. We came downstairs and we saw the bodies bound and gagged, and blood everywhere. So much blood. We didn't make the phone call. We don't know who did." End quote. So now we're learning that the students were bound and gagged. Such an upsetting detail. That would also explain why the 2 survivors upstairs did not hear this going down. We're also hearing that the 4 victims were found deceased in their beds, so whoever did this did catch them all unaware. Now, in that first sentence of Dylan's where she writes, "We heard Xana and Ethan come home first and talked to him," I think Dylan means that she and Bethany spoke to Ethan. I heard another podcaster interpreting that as they heard Xana and Ethan talking to him, as in talking to the killer, but I think that is probably not the case. If so, I'm pretty sure the police would have that person in custody by now. Now, this other podcaster brought up the guy in the food truck video who appears to be with Madison and Kaylee, the one who puts his hoodie up. That dude does seem to be stalking the girls to some degree. It is very odd that he hangs out there without appearing to order any food, and he attempts to alter his appearance by pulling the hoodie up. I don't think this guy is who Dylan and Bethany heard Xana and Ethan talking to, but I do think this guy may be involved. His demeanor screams suspicious to me. And again, I want to reiterate, I believe that Dylan and Bethany spoke to Ethan. I think that's what they meant about talked to him. This crime was so violent that blood was seen dripping out of the walls on the exterior of the house. I would imagine this house will need to be torn down because what students are going to want to live there moving forward? According to Idaho State Police Communications Director Aaron Snell, who spoke to ABC News, investigators are speaking to these two incredibly fortunate roommates. Snell said, and I quote, "Potentially they are witnesses. Potentially they are victims. Potentially they're the key to this whole thing." End quote. According to Snell, the police do not have a suspect, but no one has been included or excluded as a person of interest or a suspect, and the police are hoping the roommates will help them figure out what occurred and why. Snell said, and I quote, "That's their story to tell." End quote. I find the statements about the two surviving roommates being potential witnesses very strange. We know they were in the home when the crime occurred and were still there when the police arrived around noon on Sunday after someone dialed 911 to say there was an unconscious person at the home. You'd think if the two roommates were aware of the attack, they'd have hightailed it out of there. The police have not said who dialed 911 or why that person said someone was unconscious there. All 4 students were deceased when the police arrived. Xana Kernodle, Xana's father, told CNN that he spoke with his daughter at around midnight on Sunday, just hours before the attack, and she was fine. According to Jeffrey, Xana always stayed in regular communication with her family. Jeffrey told CNN that the autopsy showed that Xana fought the perpetrator based on the bruises she sustained during the attack. He said, and I quote, "She's a tough kid. Whatever she wanted to do, she could do it." End quote. Jeffrey also spoke to People magazine and told them this about his daughter. "She just liked having fun. She was, all the time, always with her friends." End quote. Xana's dad also expressed confusion over why someone turned up at that house and did this to his daughter. He said Xana was just hanging out at home with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin. Jeffrey also talked about the security of the home Xana was living in with her friends. He said that the front door had a lock with a number code, so the perpetrator either knew the code or went to the side sliding door of the home to see if it was unlocked and perhaps found it unlocked. Ethan Chapin's mother, Stacy, also spoke to the press, and she said that her son was spending the night with his girlfriend the night they died. Xana Kernodle also spoke at length about his daughter's relationship with Ethan Chapin. He told Arizona's Family News that Xana and Ethan had been dating about a year, give or take. Jeffrey said, and I quote, "When I went up there, I saw her just a week before that, and she changed a lot. She had a life. She got to see what it was like to have a boyfriend you live with, and she really turned around. She was really responsible, helping him out with his studies and stuff. I was really impressed." End quote. A GoFundMe has been created by a close friend of Xana's to help her father, Jeffrey, with funeral costs. This fund was set up entirely by Xana's friend, and she's hoping that the money might take some of the stress off the family during this horrible time in their lives. I'll leave a link to that GoFundMe in the description. The description of the GoFundMe reads in part as follows: "Waking up and realizing it's a day Xana won't be in is unbearable." End quote. So sad. And if any of you need a reminder that most human beings are kind and loving, let me just tell you that the GoFundMe had a goal of $20,000 and it's now at $34,495. Sometimes in true crime, we need to be reminded that most human beings are loving and caring. Note that thus far, no weapons have been found. The Moscow Police Department is asking anyone who may have information about the crime to call 208-883-7054. Now, because I spoke about blood and other violent details, this video cannot be monetized. If you appreciate my research and hard work, please consider donating to the channel or signing up for a membership. I depend on this channel for my livelihood, so every little bit helps. And if you cannot afford to donate, I still love you, and if you can hit that like button, that's equally fantastic. Until the next time on Bed Crime Stories.